got a new cut, which I hate. Don't even talk about it. I hate my hair too short, and the bobber went way too short. Another thing as well is my cats have like ruined one of my favourite hoodies, so just ignore that too. And my cats are literally taking the piss because they uncovered this fish toy, and after reading Geo, what the hell? This seriously like terrified me. It just came out of nowhere. I was like, did somebody put mechanical legs on this and make it walk? But no, it's just my cats having fun with me apparently. I did finish Shiver, and I do think this is the best collection so far that I've read. I think the majority of the stories in this I gave pretty high ratings because it just felt like, at least, you know what, actually, every single story in this scared me in some way. There were so many things that Junji Ito played up on that I think just made this collection stand out. With all of the one-shot story ratings averaged out, this one gets a 7.20, which is so good. The previous two have gotten like under a 6, and this one is just like, oh. And I feel like I have found a new favourite story in this one too, and I'm just excited to talk about this one. So the first story is called Used Record, and I feel like this is probably one of the not as great stories from this collection. I gave this one a 6.5, which is still great, but it did take some like horrifying turns. So essentially we have these two characters, and one of them, like, I'm terrible with names. There are so many one-shots and so many different character names, and a lot of the characters do look quite similar, I'm not gonna lie. Like the way that Junji Ito draws like young boys, for example, they just all pretty much look the same to me. They mainly all look pretty much the same. I mean, there are two female main characters in this one. One of them shows their friend this record that they found, and they listen to it, and it's like really beautiful and amazing, and the friend who she shows it to wants to listen to it all the time, every time. So the friend asks, oh, can I borrow it? And she says, no, you can't. So the friend ends up like stealing it, and the person who steals it accidentally kills her friend when she tries to get it back. What is it about this record that draws her in? At least to the point where she ends up covering her friend in a sheet, and she's just like, oh, don't hate me, okay? And just like walks away from that. Like, imagine a record that does that to you, where you would literally kill one of your friends in order to take it and think that's okay. Like, honestly, the human psyche that Junji Ito explores sometimes is just so like abnormal and strange to me. I'm just like, this is not normal behavior. But she looks like a normal person, which I think is something that really unsettled me more about this story and other stories where people seem, and it happens quite a few times now actually, where people have this unnatural obsession with something, and yet they look human, they look normal, they look fine, but they're not, and they do these really odd, bizarre things. So this was just like another one of those things where it was like, okay, not a whole else more happens in this one, just other than we find out that the record is a song that a singer sang after they died, and like they had finally got their big break. They got into the record studio, well, they were going to the record studio to sing and record their debut, but they got killed on the way while they're dying. They die in the record studio before they can sing, and it's only after they're dead that they start singing. So like, that was really creepy. That's essentially what this record is, and the character who steals the record from a friend ends up running into other people who want the record for themselves. It leads to awful things where other people start to get obsessed with it too. It's a little bit like that story, Splendid Song something, where a song gets stuck in the main character's head. But one thing I really love about this collection in particular actually is the author commentary at the end of the stories. This is the first time I've come across it, and I love hearing more about Junji Ito's process of coming up with these stories and just explaining the stories a little bit more, so I really appreciated that. So yeah, 6.5 out of 10 for Used Record. It was a decent start to the collection. So the next story is called Shiver, which is what the collection is actually named after. And this one, like, oh god, like the holes in this, like the holes that are in the human body, oh, it's just so upsetting. Has anyone seen, I think it's like a pomegranate that's on the cover of one of Stephanie Meyer's books, which is like the Twilight books, and the holes in that kind of freaks me out a little bit, which is why I hate that cover. In this story, oh god, it just, the whole holes that are in the bodies, oh, it just, probably an irrational fear, but I gave this one an 8 out of 10. While I love the idea of the holes and things, like, and honestly, like, skip ahead if you do not like this kind of thing. While I love that whole idea of it, I'm not sure I really connected with the story overall. So there is a young boy who has a neighbour, and his neighbour is a young girl. She always seems to be in the house, and there is a regular doctor who visits her. And when he sees the girl, she has like these holes in her arm, and she's pointing somewhere. And it's just a little bit strange. Oh, God, I don't know if I should actually show you the thing. Like, it is gross. It is very gross. Her arm is covered in countless holes. Oh, it's just, oh. But it reminds the main character of his grandpa who died with all of these holes in his body. And it creeps me out, honestly. The body horror that Junji Ito does, there is quite a bit of it. And it always seems to be in a way that feels like it could happen a lot of the times. I mean, sometimes it is a little bit extraordinary, you know? Like, maybe it's a bit too much. But potentially, and I'm sure there have been cases where people have had holes in their body and in their skin. And it I hate it. I hate it. So yeah, the main boy character, his friend ends up visiting. They go through the grandpa's journals. They find out about him being in the war, as well as like this little creature thingamabobby. And this creature thingamabobby ends up being the thing that the young girl points to. And out of nowhere at the end of this, a little bit of time has passed. The girl seems to be healed, which is odd. But then the main character, his friend, who also read the journal, his body is riddled with holes. It is so vile, like his eye has like come down and it's looking through one of the other holes that isn't his eye socket. Like, that is fucked up, Junji Ito. How dare you? How dare you even draw this? It is disgusting. But he did find that beetle thing that was in the journal, and the doctor is going after him. And I just feel like the whole story itself, like, it could have been higher, but I wasn't really invested in the friend getting the whole treatment. I think it would have been more impactful if the main character had have. So I feel like maybe the concept was a little bit more than the actual story that was told. But I think 8 out of 10 is still fantastic for it. Oh, okay, and then we get to Fashion Model, which is another one that I was unsure how to rate. The person in it is extremely bizarre and does genuinely terrify me too. I ended up giving this one a rating of 8 out of 10 also. But again, at the end, I might bump ratings up if I feel like the story has stayed with me. I feel like that's also a big factor into Junji Ito stories. Like, me just binging them all in one go, essentially, means that I don't really get to sit with them. So I think at the end of the video, I might revisit these stories and the ratings of them. But I think this one will most likely end up staying with me for a little bit. So essentially, we follow a guy who just randomly finds this magazine. In this magazine is this fashion model, and she doesn't look like a typical model. She's surrounded by like these beautiful girls and things, but she has this really odd look about her. She has these really piercing eyes. Her face is almost elongated, and these very hollow cheekbones that just don't fit in with anybody else in the magazine. It's like she stands out even more because of that. And whenever she looks like she's looking at you. Even me, just looking at this, not just the character is also weirded out by it, but me actually looking at this, it looks like she's looking at me. And I'm sorry, but that is genuinely terrifying. And just panels like this, even though it's just in his imagination, it really does stick with you. So some time has passed again. The main character and his friends are doing like this open call for like this little indie film that they're making. And so they have like this little casting call. They're trying to get people for it. Lo and behold, somebody who applied for it is the woman from the magazine, which again, it's just like odd, isn't it? Like the fact that he saw her in the magazine and she's applying for this little project. It's okay. And I just thought maybe the story would just be about changing the beauty stereotypes or like what we consider or deem beautiful. Maybe it would flip that on its head and maybe make us feel uncomfortable by our own judgments. And I feel like partly that is what the story is doing. And then we end up getting that model coming, and again, like she's not really saying anything, she's just looking. And I didn't want to cast too much judgment because I thought, oh, maybe she'll turn out to be a normal person and the actual monster will be the beautiful girl that they ended up hiring, the person they overlooked because she didn't look like her. But essentially they go on location to film, and she does actually end up turning out to be a genuine monster. She has these razor sharp teeth. and they don't even think she's human. And she does start to kill the people, and she says that she's the protagonist. So like, she is a monster. I don't think it flipped that stereotype on its head at all, but I feel like that's maybe what the point of the story was to begin with. But it did end up going into this whole like, I'm gonna pretty much kill everyone. It doesn't show you that or anything. And I do feel like this fashion model is going to stick with me, because I just feel like her design itself, even though she looks a little bit like from The Mystery of the Haunted House, she kind of looks a little bit like her, and she is tall like her too. I feel like Junji Ito also has a thing for really tall, scary looking women. I don't know. But yeah, that was a really good story. And then we get to Hanging Blimp, or Hanging Balloons, I believe it's also called. Now this story I already knew existed, because when I was talking to a friend about Junji Ito a little while back, they mentioned like the Hanging Balloons story as one of their favourites. And they didn't quite fully explain exactly everything, but I just remember being a little bit creeped out by the summary of it, just from what they told me about it. So I was really excited to read this, and it did not disappoint. I think this is definitely one of my favourites so far, and I gave it a 9.5 out of 10. Could potentially be a 10 out of 10 when I finish my reading blog. But essentially in this story, there are these big, huge faces that come down from the sky, and they have a noose attached to them. And the faces, they look like the people in this town, and it seems like that huge balloon is trying to hang you. It's like specifically coming after you, and it can talk like you too, it can sound like you. So it all starts with the death of a girl who was found hanging outside of her apartment, and then people start seeing like her face huge in the sky. Yeah, like this, it's floating around. Like, I'm just imagining a huge face just floating in the air. And like, that is genuinely upsetting. Even the main character of the story, this young girl, she sees it too. And she tries to stop one of her friends, from approaching it, but then it has the balloon face of him, and he's now been hanged, and she watches it all happen, and it's like, nothing is explained, which I think is so brilliant, because where did these balloons come from? How are they talking? How are they moving? How do they function? You know what I mean? Like, you just don't get told these things, and it's genuinely terrifying. And then you see his body just hanging from that huge face, just flying in the sky. Like, can you imagine just people hanging from the sky? That is upsetting. The next day, some of her friends get taken, and that's when she realizes the danger she's in. And again, like, what do you do? What do you do in that situation? The faces are genuinely scary. I feel like Junji Ito has a great way of showing faces. You also can't even really fight back either, because one of them gets shot in the face, and her face just deflates. So like, it kills her. So it's like, what? How do you survive? I mean, yes, kind of staying inside and locking the doors and not allowing anything to get near your neck, definitely. But one thing I found like so dumb were character decisions in this. Like, the dad, like, watching all of this unfold on the TV, right? So she's home with her family. They're seeing like the flying objects attacking the whole country, and people are getting hanged by the corresponding face, and they have no idea what to do. And then the dad is just like, at any rate, I'm going to the office. I have some work to take care of that has to be done today. After watching this news report of people dying, like, you can even see it on the TV. They're actually showing all of these hanging bodies from the sky, and the dad's just like, oh, I've got some work to do in the office, I've got to go. He literally dies straight away. He gets taken straight away. Like, why are you so he deserved to die, not gonna lie. But yeah, then the brother goes, the mum goes, so it's just like the main character left now at the end. Not only does it end with a feeling of loneliness, but also the feeling of helplessness. Again, like, how is she supposed to survive? Like, what's she gonna do for food? She can't just stay in the house like forever without food, you know? So it ends so brilliantly, I think. So I really enjoyed it. 9.5 out of 10 for that one. I just think it was just such a great concept, and a really good execution too, even though some character decisions really annoyed me. So then we get into Marionette Mansion, which, if you have a fear of puppets and marionettes, then this is the one for you. I don't personally really have that much of a fear of puppets. I mean, if a puppet is creepy looking, then I will be scared of it. But yeah, there is one creepy looking one that looks a little bit like some of the elongated face villains that we've had so far in Junji Ito. So it does kind of look like even a little bit like the fashion model, a little bit. But yeah, there was a family, they use marionettes, that's their thing, that's their job. A few years pass, the main character, his brother, has his own house, wife and child, and when he and his sister go and visit, that creepy puppet thing is, you know, there, letting them in, and his brother, his wife and child are on strings, and they're actually being used like puppets from people in the ceiling. So I just found that a brilliantly bizarre story, and I was like, okay, we're flipping on its head the whole idea that people are controlling puppets, but what about when the puppets control the people? And there are some like instances in the story where that is brought up, so I really enjoyed that aspect of it. Just truly a bizarre thing that I never would have thought of even coming up with myself. And while it's not outwardly scary for the majority of it, there is like this undercurrent of fear of like, why and what? You know, like, why are they doing this? The main character, he has a, well, kind of girlfriend who we met when he was younger. And she comes to the house because she thinks that he's having an affair. But that's just a puppet. And when she comes, everyone in their ceiling, we do actually see who's in the ceiling. It's just like, they look like normal people-ish, kind of. But I'm still like, why? Like, what was their purpose? Like, they just randomly start to, well, it seems like kill the people on the strings. They're hanging from the ceiling and they're just like, they can't do anything and they're screaming for help. And then he finds his girlfriend dead, stabbed to death by the elongated faced marionette puppet thing. And it's genuinely disturbing, that poor girl. But yeah, now all of his family have been turned into like these puppet things, and all the people in the ceiling are now dead too. It's just like, how the fact that there is like an absence of explanation a lot of the time, it does creep me out more than if it was explained. I'm just left bewildered. And it was so good, so I gave this one an 8 out of 10. Like, it's, again, so high. I feel like this definitely was, like, the strongest collection. It's just like, oh, let's put some of Junji Ito's best stuff in one book. And they got themselves a winner. And then we get into Painter. And this is where I meet Tomie. And I was wondering, well, I don't know if I've shot myself in the foot by reading this first over Tomie, or if this was, like, a good introduction to the character. Because I mean, I don't know who or what she is, essentially. But again, it goes into that whole obsession plotline that we've had a few times of people irrationally getting obsessed with her. And, you know, we have a rising artist, he's our main character, he randomly meets Tomie, and she seems to be rather rude and abrupt, but she ends up getting him to paint her, a little bit like Dorian Gray in a way. And she wants somebody to capture her beauty, and he doesn't seem to do a very good job, apparently. So she goes to someone else who makes statues of her. But this man, he gets like creepily obsessed with Tomie. Like, he can't stop thinking about her, and he can't seem to get the inspiration back for creating artwork like before. There is also like this really creepy picture of Tomie that is like, kind of a little bit blurred, but it looks like she has like another face, which really creepy. Like, I do love the fact that Junji Ito, even though this story was a little bit more subtle in terms of horror, he'll still be able to put in a horrific image. And that is horrific to me. But yeah, there is another sculptor who has been sculpting Tomie, and the painter gets, you know, really possessive, kills him by accident. There are all these Tomie statues, and Tomie herself, even though he, again, tried so hard to capture her beauty in a painting, she is still absolutely rude and awful to him. It's horrible, it's the worst, you're the worst painter in the world. So he ends up killing her. Like, how do I even explain the ending? There's just, like, it just seems like her body and I guess the statues or her body parts are like multiplying a little bit. Like, maybe after 4 days, like, all of this happened. Faces growing out of limbs and heads. Each piece of her body began to grow. Her flesh multiplies before me. Was this Tomie's introduction, and then we get into the main book, Tomie? I mean, Junji Ito himself says, I drew the Tomie series intermittently after her initial appearance. Then my editor asked me if I wouldn't try focusing on it. Painter is the first chapter of that series. I gave this one a 7.5 out of 10. And then we get into The Long Dream. This one again has a really unique concept of like what would happen if you were in your dreams, but your dream, even though like the same amount of time passes in the real world, but your dream lasts a month or a month and a half or years. Like what happens if it lasts years and years and years and years? What happens if your dream lasts 10 years but like it's still just like a day in real time? It's a really hard one to explain, but it was super crazy, super weird, and I ended up giving this one a 7 out of 10 because we have this guy who is saying that his dreams are lasting so long, and we have these scientists or like doctors who are trying to find out what's going on, but they never have the answers. And again, like I feel like that's a huge thing for Junji Ito to not explain himself. This guy, like 10 years in his dream, and then his body changes so awfully. Like this is his body, this is him. What does it do to your body? Like I'm so like creeped out. Like what if this happened to me? What if I was in a dream for 10 years? Would this happen to me? Would I look like that? It's genuinely creepy. It's unsettling. I don't think a whole lot more to say about this one other than it has a really sick ending of the fact that the doctor is so unaware of what's going on that he's going to end up using these crystal things that were found in this guy's head and give it to another patient so that he can study it more. And this patient is totally unaware of what's happening. The idea of being tested on without your knowledge is another thing that really freaks me out. Then we get into Honored Ancestors. I think this is when the stories start to lose their steam a little bit. I feel like they didn't have the best stories saved for the rest of the book. I mean, the stories are still good. I gave this one a 6 out of 10. I feel like these ones are more based on, like, there is a specific image that stands out, but the story overall doesn't, in a way. Like, in this one, we follow a guy who is trying to get this girl to become his wife, even though he looks so bloody young. Like, he's still in school, essentially. At least I think that's a school uniform. And he's trying to get his friend to be with him because his dad is dying. Like, this is like really creepy. His dad is dying. This was such an odd exchange. Like, he just crawls in, not revealing the rest of his head, but he just crawls into the room and starts talking about her to her. It seems like she's lost her memory from some past trauma, and it is indicated that she lost her memory from actually seeing what is about to happen. So this disgusting image here is the guy's dad, and there is the top of the skull of all of the ancestors kind of making this huge caterpillar looking thing, and it's like it's preserving the brains and the minds of the ancestors that they have, and the heads just keep growing and growing. Right above my dad's head is my aunt's, above that's my grandma's and my great uncle's head. That is, I've got no words. Like, the story itself, I didn't care that much for, but this was genuinely creepy. That is a great image. I don't know why, but like, this is like Human Centipede, but if like it was just people's brains. People's heads that were attached. The main guy, he is trying to get his friend, his girlfriend, potential girlfriend, to give him an heir because he is the last person in this long line of ancestors and descendants. So he needs to carry on the line. And that is kind of what caused her to lose her memory. It was fine. It was interesting, especially since at the end we do have the boy himself have the heads as part of his head. I would not want to be part of this family. Seriously, like, if I was that boy, I would want to try and get as far away as possible from this. Like, why would you suffer yourself to be weighed down by all of these heads? You wouldn't be able to leave the house or do anything. Then we get into Greased Oil, or just Greased. I'm not 100% sure what the title of this one is. This one is another one where I didn't really care too much about the story, so I gave it 5 out of 10. There is definitely a scene that really stands out though, and if you read this you'll know exactly what scene it is. But yeah, there is a girl, she lives with her brother and father. They live in a restaurant, and the restaurant itself is covered in grease. Like, it's in the air, everything is covered in it. It's like this really vile and unhygienic place, and her brother is randomly drinking salad oil like no tomorrow. That's like his favorite thing. He grows these pimples on his face, like really bad acne, and he gets picked on, so he picks on his sister. And his face ends up getting that much worse. And I feel like as a teenager, when you're, breaking out and you're getting spots and pimples or acne, anything like that, And like, this is so relatable that he looks like this. He's got all of these awful things on his face, but it's the, oh, I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't do it. It's, oh my god, it makes me want to be sick. I'm so glad I haven't eaten yet because it would just come straight back up. Oh, and so he does this to his sister. He squeezes all of the pus from his spots until it rains down on his sister's face. Oh god, it's vile. It is absolutely vile. I feel like this scene will definitely stick out to me. I still didn't enjoy the whole overall story as much, but that has to be one of the most horrific scenes I've read yet. And, you know, there is like this other storyline about her dad trying to get her to drink salad oil, and potentially the dad is feeding the restaurant customers his son. And we end it as well that the dad has cut off his leg and it's just dripping oil. Like, he is literally made of oil, essentially. So is our main character also made of oil? I don't know. It's just, it's so strange. So strange. There is a bonus story to this one too. Like, that was the final full story. There is a bonus story, which I actually still enjoyed. I gave it a 6.5 out of 10. And it's kind of a continuation of Fashion Model. And this one's called Fashion Model Cursed Frame. So we have this young girl, she wants to be a model, but she hates photos where her limbs are sort of like cut off from the frame of the picture. So like, she has to always do like full body shots. And, you know, she's applied for this place. They said, oh yes, we will do a full body shot, that's fine. And she meets the fashion model from before, who again still is very intimidating, very scary. I think it's just the fact that she is a lot taller and she can just descend on you at any minute because she's that tall. It's so intimidating. And again, the teeth is very upsetting. But anyway, some time passes. The model sees her images in a magazine, but they have cut off like parts of her body in the frame. And she is mortified by it. That's not what they said they would do. And then she also, I don't want to show you this image yet because it's one of the most upsetting, but it's hard, I don't know how to cover it. But yeah, she flicks through and she sees that model again, the really odd one, and she's like, this girl, I wonder why she's modeling with looks like this. And then suddenly in her apartment, there's the fashion model with looks like what? And then she's just standing there over her. Like, do you mind? She's just like literally broken in. That's terrifying. When did you... And then it goes to the next page, which is the end of the story, and she's like dead. The young girl's dead. You didn't even get to see her die. Okay, yeah, sorry. My camera died just as the main character in this story died. The fashion model, she's put like this frame around her body. She's taken off her limbs, so she only fits in that frame. And when I first started the story, I kind of assumed that's what would happen because of her, you know, emphasizing the fact that she needs to have her full body in frame. Like, she can't have any of her limbs cut off from it. And I just kind of automatically thought, oh, she's going to get her limbs taken off at the end of this story. And I was proved right. But still, it didn't take away from the enjoyment of this, even though it was so short. It's only about like 6 pages or something like that. But again, it's just like this whole fashion model person. She is just really freaking me out. And the fact that she just broke into her apartment without her realizing and does this. She's a psychopath. But she's also just like a fashion model too. It's so bizarre. I can't explain any of it. Really enjoyed this. I don't even know what is going to live up to this after this, unless it's like Uzumaki. Again, we don't want to read that one just yet. We want to save that one for a rainy day, which, you know, today it is raining a little bit again.